Hi everyone, Dr. Nemechek here. I want to talk to everybody about something that I've been seeing over the last year and a half, and that's how uh, COVID seems to be disrupting the recovery in a number of children with autism and developmental delay. 2 years more ago, I didn't quite understand what was going on, but because we had a number of children that were recovering very, very nicely, and then they seemingly stopped, and we couldn't figure out why. It was very difficult to get these kids back on um, a good recovery path. And then we started isolating this, and a number of the cases were corresponding to when the child had COVID, even very mild COVID, or when the couple family members had COVID and the child had some mild symptoms and they didn't test them, but the child more likely had COVID too. That was an obvious event near the time when the parents were noticing that the recovery had stopped, that they had plateaued. And we're talking about kids that are, like, for instance, on continuous rifaximin doing great. All right. Prior to COVID, I never saw a kid on continuous rifaximin doing really well on recovery suddenly stop. So this was a very unusual thing. I wouldn't see a plateau on rifaximin. Okay. And so we've been working at this, and there's evidence now that COVID is causing damage to the nervous system of the small intestine. And I believe some of these kids have slow motility in the small intestine, which will make it more difficult for medications like rifaximin to work. So the benefit of a rifaximin is it's helpful in a normally or somewhat normally functioning small intestine. Just like antibiotics are very effective for pneumonia in a fairly normal lung. But if you give antibiotics to somebody with a bad lung, say they have bad emphysema, they might not work because the underlying anatomy has been disrupted. Kind of the same thing with the small intestine. If it's going too slow, there is a very clear chance that rifaximin at twice a day or 3 times a day may not be effective. So this started me using things like trying rifaximin combined with inulin, rifaximin combined with partially hydrogenated gargum or PHGG, and then we were using a motility drug called mestinon. And now occasionally these would help. Occasionally we could get more recovery again in the child, but there was still something missing. And in the last year, we now have studies that are telling us that COVID not only will damage the nervous system of the small intestine, causing it to go too slowly, but it also has the potential of kind of punching relatively large holes through the small intestine. Now, I mean relative to what leaky gut is. Leaky gut is you have these cells lined up in the small intestine, and you're leaking through the seam between them. What's happening in COVID, it looks like entire 2 or 3 widths of cells are being just destroyed, and there's a big hole, and lots of material is flooding through, and it's looking like the subjects are unable to repair the small intestine correctly. Now, this is interestingly a similar thing that we encountered in HIV, and it's been shown, back in the 90s and thousands, we saw these problems with intestinal issues, a lot of inflammation in HIV patients, and we had discovered if we would supplement them with a amino acid called glutamine, that they could recover very, very quickly, surprisingly. They've now, in more recent papers, have actually shown HIV punches these same holes through the small intestine. And so there's a very interesting parallel. So, all the kids, I still use the standard approach. Fish oil, olive oil, first with inulin. You get as much mileage out of that if you can. If that truly plateaus, now plateau isn't generally they suddenly worsen. It's just they quit getting better. Okay, those are look like two very different things. Then we'd switch to continuous rifaximin. And then if that's not working, there was this kind of almost like a fishing expedition where I used rifaximin and inulin and PHGG or mestinon or the triple combination and so forth. But what we have found is these children that have a correlation for their lack of progress around the time of COVID, either known in that patient or known in the household, all right, we are supplementing with the amino acid L-glutamine, and we are starting to get some very, very positive feedback from that. So I think it's going to be a significant improvement. This is kind of a complicated thing. We're going to go into this in great detail in the Nemechek Navigator community app. That's at nemecheknavigator.com. We're going to have a 1-hour live presentation and then a live Q&A session. I'll be answering particular questions you might have. It's going to be on July 8th at 9 a.m. Los Angeles time, July 8th, 9 a.m. Los Angeles time or Pacific time. And it's a small fee to join for the month to get in and be a part of that. So there's going to be a lot of important information. Again, an hour or so, may even run over, of me talking about this in great detail with doses and my new algorithms, how I go through all of this, and then a live Q&A session for everybody. So I hope to see you there, and there's going to be a lot of good information, and we're going to get these kids back on track. Thanks. Bye.